Story from BossSpleenRippa. So I've been holding on to this experience for about a year now, and have decided to share it with you guys, mostly to get it off my chest. I work in a deep underground potash mine. For anyone who has never experienced what it's like to be several thousand feet underground, it is a very uncanny experience. There is no natural lighting, and usually the only artificial light comes from your cap lamp or any vehicles you're operating. You can hear the earth shift and the vast weight above you slowly bear down on the tunnel you're working in. I've been working underground for about 6 months and was being sent to an abandoned part of the mine to make it safe enough for crews to be sent in to recover some equipment and machinery that had been left behind. The area I was being sent to was infamous for being the location of a mine operator that I will refer to as Chris, having been killed by being pinched in between two pieces of equipment and having his torso split in half. This accident had shaken a lot of the guys underground, and many refused to work in that area again. So, as the junior operator, I was the unlucky bastard that had to go in. I was sent in by myself to get the job started, and was supposed to get another operator to come help me once I was ready. The beginning tunnel had so much potash dust piled up over the years that it reached my knees, and made it almost impossible to see while driving my bolter, a vehicle that drives 8-foot metal bolts into the ceiling to prevent the ceiling from caving in. I remember feeling so uneasy while I was in there, like I wasn't supposed to be there. Once I got to my first location to start bolting, I began setting everything up. I was setting up bolts when I noticed a moving light coming from the opposite end of the tunnel where I had entered. I initially thought it could be another worker that was also doing work in that tunnel, so I started doing cap light signals, our own form of sign language with our light so we can communicate. I signaled for whoever was making the light to come towards me. Once I made that signal, the light stopped moving, and after a few seconds, disappeared. I was becoming worried and tried to reason to myself what the light could be. It really couldn't have been another worker, because it wasn't safe to go any further until my work was done. It couldn't have been a piece of equipment, because it responded to my light. I was terrified and honestly didn't know what to do. I was scared to attempt to leave because my bolter kicked up so much dust, but I also didn't want to go by foot because I'd only have my cap lamp for lighting. I decided to stay camped inside the bolter until my backup arrived. The light never returned, and when my coworker arrived, I gained enough confidence to finish the job and leave. I don't know what I saw, but I can't help but think it's the soul of Chris. The idea of his soul being trapped in that tunnel really bothers me, and I actually left the underground for a service position partially because of this encounter. And I'm not the only one to experience those ghost lights. I've had a few guys tell me that they've had similar experiences. Lights that made no sense. Story from Ouija, 1953. Early in my work repairing police cars, we had a few strange days. I was working in a huge repair facility repairing police cars. We had a vehicle get towed in, filled with blood and brains on the driver's seat and floor. They wanted us to drive it in so we could remove bullets from the engine compartment. We refused to drive it in, and the policeman that worked there put plastic on the seat and drove it in. It took a few hours to dismantle the car until we found all the bullets. After that, they just left the car there in our shop. I inquired about moving it, but they said no, just leave it. We did get a story about it. The quick version is that the suspect pushed the officer on the floor, ran into the car and tried to run him down. The officer discharged his weapon and one round took him in the head. After they left, the vehicle almost pulsed with negative, angry energy. The whole mood of the shop was dark. At lunch, a motorcycle fell off the repair lift, something that hadn't happened before or since. An hour after that, a tow truck came out as part of the RPN. We were running high because the PTO was being used. It ran in reverse for 150 yards through our large parking lot and hit a box truck at about 30 miles an hour, 15 feet from the motorcycle lift that had failed. The mood kept getting darker. At the end, the mechanics were asking if they could put religious candles around the car. I told them no, we can't have open flames in the shop. When the time came to close, it was just me and the later shift mechanic. When I walked the floor to the solvent tanks, light bulbs were blinking throughout the shop. We were very uneasy, and as I approached the car in question, I could see flickering reflected on the window of the car next to it. In that reflection, I could see someone kneeling near the source of the flickering. I got angry and started yelling, "I told you guys, no candles!" When the mechanic next to me and I turned the corner, there was nothing. No man, no candle, nothing. I told the mechanic, "Let's get the hell out of here," closed the shop and left. The car was there 3 days with minor incidents, but mostly we stayed away from it. When they took the car, it was like night and day. When I first saw the movie The Grudge, I thought to myself, yeah, I can see that happening. Enraged death can stain things. Story from Adam Bomb NZ. I went to a boarding school when I was a teenager and went to one of the older schools in New Zealand, even though it's a relatively young country itself as far as history goes. Obviously, at boarding school, you often end up with a bunch of kids with too much time on their hands. So you end up creating your own fun, which inevitably leads to situations like the one I am about to describe. In my last year of high school, I ended up getting made a prefect of the boarding house. There were 8 of us, and we were allowed to stay up an hour and a half later than the rest of the students after lights out. We would usually just hang out and watch TV or play PlayStation during that extra time. However, one day a rumor started going around about a ghost that would roam the school grounds, and some kids used to say that they saw it walking across the school playing fields. Being bored one night after lights out, we decided to make a Ouija board to see if we could contact it. There were 6 of us, and we got a lunch tray from the school cafeteria, Scrabble letters for the alphabet, and hand-drawn pieces of paper for yes/no, which we laid out on a circle on the tray. We then put a water glass upside down to use as a planchette, and we each put an index finger on the glass and asked the ghost to speak with us. After summoning the entity, the glass slowly started to move, although we were all skeptical and each of us were accusing each other of moving it. In any case, we asked it to move the glass to the letters to spell out the answers to our questions. The glass was moving around with more speed as we got going, but we were having trouble getting it to spell out anything that made sense, as it would just move to random letters. When we specifically asked it to spell out our headmaster's surname, however, it spelled it out perfectly. We started asking stupid stuff about which girls fancied us and so forth, and it was all a bit of fun at that point. Then, out of the blue, one of the other prefects came into the common room where we were using the board and told us the housemaster was coming. We freaked out, as this was forbidden, and I quickly picked up the tray and put it securely on the top set of a set of bookshelves where you couldn't see the layout from eye level, and quickly jumped on a couch in front of the TV alongside my friends who were using the board. Literally seconds after that, the housemaster came in and started chatting with us. After about a minute into the conversation, the glass threw itself across the room and landed on the carpet right next to the couch I was sitting on. No one was within 10 feet of the shelves, and the tray itself was unmoved. It was like the glass was literally picked up and thrown by itself. Everyone sat there in stunned silence, and no one moved or said anything for about 10 seconds. Our housemaster then just said goodnight and left, and we were all so shocked we didn't talk about it until the next day when we were trying to process it all. We never experienced anything else or saw anything else, but to this day, 20 years later, it still shocks me to think about it. Story from EGA 93. Hi everyone, just wanted to share some of my experience that happened in one of my old jobs. This happened to me in a dialysis clinic where I was a nurse. If you don't know, a dialysis clinic is where people with kidney failure go for their treatments 3 times a week. I typically worked from 4:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. I would usually take my first break around 6 a.m. No one else would be in that part of our unit until 7:30 a.m. I would take a nap in the storage room where we had an old dialysis chair. From that spot, a lot of staff would experience nightmares or sleep paralysis. For me, I would often feel ice-cold chills next to me, despite being wrapped in blankets. I've heard whispering when no one else was around. One time I woke up from a nap to find my shoes I had kicked off, stuffed with paper towels. On the treatment floor, we would notice that from particular stations, some equipment, such as blood pressure cuffs, would start swinging at random times. We also had times where, before the patients arrived, the call lights would be activated. Our call lights had a physical button that had to be pressed down with some force. So, the call lights would be activated to an empty station, we would turn it off, and another call light would be activated on the opposite corner of the room. The craziest thing that happened to me was when I was closing the clinic up by myself. I had stayed a little late to catch up on some paperwork, and all the other staff and patients had left the building already. At times, the clinic went dead silent. All the ambient noise, from buzzing lights to the noise from outside, went out, as if a mute button had been pressed. I didn't think much of it, since I wanted to get my work done and go home. Afterwards, I headed towards the back of the unit, near the storage room where we would take naps, to turn off our water system for the night. As I was heading out, I instinctively kept looking back over my shoulder. I picked up my pace because it felt like something was chasing me out. As I reached the end of the hallway, I felt a whoosh of energy go through me, and the banners along the sides of the wall started shaking. At that point, I left the clinic without clocking out and got to my car as fast as possible. I figure that there's a lot of spiritual energy in places like these, since the patients spend so much time here, often feeling negative emotions, dealing with their illness before eventually passing. Story from Stink-Eye 42069, aka Jumbaliah. I grew up in a 5-bedroom, 2-story, 100-year-old house that is haunted. Me, my brother, and my parents moved into this house when I was about 10 years old. It's an old brick house that needed a lot of work. The roof needed replacing, areas of the house were crumbling on the outside and needed to be re-bricked, and a young girl died of dehydration in the attic some 30 years prior. The official police records indicate it was an accident. The girl was in the attic on a hot summer day and died there due to heat stroke/dehydration. Now, this isn't an attic that is above the house. It's more like a large, walk-in, unfinished closet. It's attached to a bedroom on the 2nd floor, my bedroom, and it's pretty hard to imagine how anyone could walk in there and willingly stay long enough to die. There's no locks on the door entering the attic, and like I said, it's not on its own floor of the house. There's no ladder that could get jammed and leave someone trapped. When the real estate agent told my parents there was a death in the house, the first thing we all thought was how someone could get trapped in there and die. My parents have always been intrigued by horror and anything supernatural. They probably thought it interesting to maybe be purchasing a haunted house. About a month or so after we had already moved in and were starting to get settled, the previous owner, the mother of the girl who had died of dehydration, came to the house to drop off a letter. To my younger self, she was easily the oldest woman I had ever seen. Very tiny, hunched over with a cane and moved slowly and shakily. She was at our front door and quietly introduced herself to my mother, handed her a letter, and left. The letter started very nice, basically welcoming us and saying she was very happy to see the house go to a nice family. At the end of the letter, she says she wished she could have continued living there, but, quote, "I am haunted by the continuous reminder of the murder of my daughter by her sister," end quote, and that she was headed out of state to find peace in her old age. Basically, exactly what we thought was true. The girl didn't die on accident. She was apparently locked in there on purpose by her sister. I have many stories of things happening in that house that I just can't explain. In one instance, me and my brother had the attic door open and were playing with toys on the floor and on my bed. The attic was basically where my parents kept old furniture and boxes and other junk. One item that was in there was an old rotary phone, unplugged, sitting on the floor next to some boxes. We started fighting, probably over something stupid, and he took the toy I had in my hand and threw it in the attic and said something along the lines of, "If you don't stop being such a baby, I'm going to lock you in the attic like that girl." We would often make references to the ghost of the house, but you guessed it, something hurt us, and that old rotary phone started ringing. Maybe it was an elaborate scheme by my brother. Maybe he had some kind of recording that would play a phone ringing sound, and he positioned it near the phone. But if that's the case, he should have become an actor. The look of sheer terror he gave me as we bolted out of the room is still engraved in my brain today, nearly 20 years later. One more instance, I had a cat, and she would often sleep in the window across the room from my bed. One night I was nearly asleep, and I hear claws scratching and little feet pattering, running extremely violently back and forth across the window, throwing the curtains around in a really dramatic fashion. I figured my cat was doing something stupid, maybe chasing a bug or something. So I sit up in bed and yell her name to get her to stop. And when I sit up, she is already sitting on the edge of my bed, peering over my legs, looking at the curtains. She is extremely fixated on the window curtain area, and now I'm worried maybe a squirrel or some other animal got into my room. I turn the lights on, slowly peel back the curtains. Nothing there.